Hello, welcome to the Startup Metrics podcast. My name is Bradley Bailyn. I'm a startup attorney as well as a very successful tech entrepreneur. And I'm launching this podcast to teach entrepreneurs something that normally you only learn after you've accepted substantial amounts of venture capital and given up substantial amounts of equity in your business. And the hope is that maybe you'll be able to get a little bit further, a little bit faster without taking venture capital. And if and when you do decide to do it, you'll get a much better valuation because you'll have already done the things that normally your first $100,000 to $1 million would have been used to do, which is developing a more professional understanding of how to grow a business using numbers. So here's a picture of me and a list of the areas in which I'm most experienced and accomplished. As you can see, it relates a lot to the kind of things that we're going to be discussing. So today, the metric of interest is going to be revenue per employee, and specifically how to maximize your revenue per employee. So let's start here. What does this metric tell us? The first thing that it tells us is whether your company is scaling effectively or whether it's blowing up like a dead star that starts out really bright like a supernova and then eventually just becomes a black hole. There are many companies that have died in the process of growing because their expenses outperform their revenues, and what looks like a successful company on the outside becomes a uncontrollable hydra, and the whole thing ends up dying. So it's extremely important that you're measuring your growth. It's better to have a very small company with one person or two people that's making a nice profit than to have a 400-person company that's barely making a living. And it happens all the time. In fact, one time I met a guy, it was very funny, a gentleman that I knew from business school. I said to him, "How's it going?" And he says to me, "It's going." How's the business? Well, we made $10 million in revenues this last year. I said, "Wow, congratulations." And he says to me, "Congratulations for what? You did not ask me what my expenses were." I said, "Okay, what are your expenses?" He says, $9,980,000. So I was able to take home $20,000 out of that $10 million. Not so good anymore, is it? I said, "I apologize. I shouldn't have said congratulations so soon." So I think that makes the point about that. Next question is, am I outperforming or underperforming the competition? That's important because a lot of the best advisors and venture capitalists, if you go that route, are not going to advise everybody in the same business. They're going to pick a horse and they're going to stick with it. So it's important not just that you're growing independently, but that you're outperforming your peers so that everybody wants to go with you and not with your competitors. And the hope is that ultimately your competitors will just fall by the wayside, or you'll acquire them, or they'll go into a related business and you'll become the unicorn of your industry. There are various metrics that are known publicly. People who are in the industry know what they are as well, so you can compare yourself to that. In addition to comparing yourself to your own year-over-year performance, you can compare yourself to the performance of competitors. And you can also answer the question, do I need investors at this point, or do I need a startup consultant? A lot of times people will come to me and they're formalizing their business, they've got their plans underway, and they'll say, "Can you help me?" I say, "I don't know, maybe I can help you. What are you trying to do?" "We're trying to take investors." "Okay, Have you ever taken investors before? No, this is my first time. Do you think you're an attractive investment target for investors? Yes. Okay. Why do you think that? How's the business doing? What are your metrics looking like? What are you profitable? Is your revenue growing? Is your user base growing? Are you making money every time you add more employees? What is it that's going to get investors excited? When I negotiate with investors for you, I like to know how strong my hand is relative to the investor that I'm speaking with. And when the metrics are high, then it's very nice. When I can't think of any reason why someone would want to make an investment, then usually the investors can't think of a reason either. And if you do find someone who just wants to get into your industry, and so they're willing to make an investment just to get a little bit of experience in your industry, a lot of times it's going to be on terms that leave you very dissatisfied later on as an entrepreneur and founder. So bottom line is, it's really helpful to know your metrics, and revenue per employee is one of the more essential metrics to know. What is revenue per employee? It's gross revenues divided by full-time equivalent employees. So in other words, you may have 7 people who are each working 10 hours a week. So you would just multiply 7 people by 10 hours, that's 70 hours a week, divide that by 40 hours, which is what one person works, and you get 1 3/4 full-time employees. That's known as a full-time equivalent calculation. So you're going to divide your gross revenues by your full-time equivalent employees, and that's going to tell you how much revenue you're making for each employee. You can calculate that over any period of time that you want, but usually a year is preferable because it smooths out whatever blips there might be that are caused by situational factors. So to take an example, let's say you have $3 million in revenues and you've got 50 full-time equivalent employees. So you're looking at $60,000 in revenues per employee. Not bad. For a startup in the service sector, a tech company in particular, $50,000 to $100,000 per employee is acceptable. Fortune 500s and other large tech companies can have much, much, much better numbers. Facebook, I believe, is around $1 million per employee. There are some highly specialized finance companies that are way, way higher than that. The major automotive manufacturers also have very high revenues per employee, but typically startups, their numbers are a bit lower because you just haven't reached that level of scale and efficiency where you're able to do it. But if you're looking at less than $50,000 per employee, you really need to be considering whether you're operating efficiently and whether you need to go back to the drawing board before even thinking about trying to scale the company or otherwise make any kind of an investment. So, how do I improve my revenue per employee? First of all, you want to spend money to make money. That means hire the best people that you possibly can, almost without regard to cost. You will ultimately find that one person who's super competent in the position will outperform 100 times over 10 people who are all sitting around waiting for you to tell them what to do. It just works that way. So the two factors you need to be thinking about here are, first of all, how many hours do you need from the best? The best person could be extremely expensive, and you may not be able to get them for 40 hours a week. Maybe you can get them for 5 hours a week, but those 5 hours are going to be quite valuable. Second thing is, you have to think about, what do I really, really need? You can't be like, I need the best bookkeeper, and I need the best of this, and I need the best of that. You do need to compromise somewhere. Typically, It's going to be your customer-facing positions, the front of the house, which is where you want to spend the most money. Your sales team should be really top-notch, whoever's doing your sales. Your customer service people should be excellent. Your lead product designer should be someone who's excellent. Anyone who has a major impact on your bottom line, you're really going to want the best people. You'd rather have 1 hour from someone who's just outstanding than more hours from someone who doesn't give you that level of excellence. I can't emphasize that enough. Now, next question is, okay, that sounds great in theory, Bradley, but how would I even know one of these super valuable people if I saw them? Everybody talks a huge game. My experience from the past 12 years of interviewing thousands of people and having hired probably hundreds of people is that top candidates have consistent, credible experience and a truly execution-oriented disposition. In other words, it's not someone who's like, yeah, I've worked for myself for the past 10 years. It's usually someone who's worked at a company where it's required to show up for work and be responsible and participate in a team in order to stick with the job. So someone who's had progressively responsible experience for 5 to 10 years and not at some rinky-dink company where it's impossible to even know if it's true or not, but usually some kind of a company that has some kind of credibility would give me a lot more reason to believe that they really did what they said they're going to do. If you can check references, of course, that's better. And lastly, you got to have people who are execution oriented. You have a lot of these people out there who all want to be the chief. They all know a better way to do it. And they have all these ideas. And the reality is that we really need 1% ideas and we need 99% work. That's just reality. And that's true no matter who you are. That's true whether you're Jeff Bezos or whether you're Bradley Bailyn or whether you're anybody else. We always need to be spending 1% of our time innovating and 99% of our time just doing the work that we need to do. Doing work takes discipline, which most people just don't have. So I like to see that someone has produced a lot of work and that they value producing a lot of work. And when I'm asking them for what they've done at their past jobs, a lot of times what I'm digging into is, how much did you actually produce? Someone's going to be like, I came up with a new program that improved sales by 98%. Okay, wonderful. How did it improve sales? Did you just think of this program? Or were you the salesperson who thought of the program and then went out and called 500 people and made it happen? I want the person who's made 500 phone calls and increased revenues by a tremendous amount, not the person who had the idea while someone else went out and made the 500 calls, if that makes sense. Next, you want to incentivize people appropriately and transparently. There's a lot of things you can use as incentives: salary, bonus based on their own performance and the performance of the company as a whole, time off, etc. And you really need to pay attention to that because people will quit if they're not properly incentivized. However, you have to keep in mind that we're in a hypersensitive time right now, and if you're listening from New York or California in particular, you're in a highly employee-friendly jurisdiction, and anything person A gets that person B did not get, the first thing person B is going to do is accuse you of discrimination. And dealing with that can be very costly for you and not at all costly for them. So before you get your incentives in place, you really want to speak with an attorney, such as myself or anyone else who regularly deals with this kind of thing, to make sure that you're on the right line and you have the right documents in place between treating people individually and potentially being biased in favor of someone, either explicitly or implicitly. Implicit bias is a very big thing right now. So you really want to make sure that there's no way you can be effectively accused of even implicit bias. Okay? Next thing is you're going to want to build an ethical culture, meaning you have a mission, you have a clearly laid out policy of company ethics, and that ethics are included in all decisions that you make, that you publicly consider the ethical ramifications for what you're doing. And you're going to find that your employees work so much harder, that you have so many less legal problems to deal with, and that your reputation as a company becomes so much better by doing that. You can't control your reputation except at the very, very beginning. And so by establishing the fact that ethics really matter to you, you build a culture which is going to serve you well for the rest of your time with that company. Next thing, it's typically recommended that your employee utilization rate is around 70% to avoid burnout and low morale. It's very tempting to get people to work 50 or 60 hours a week. A lot of times at the beginning they're excited and they want to show their value, and they'll do it. Problem is, people get tired, they get burned out, they get angry, and even if it's only subconscious, they get tired. And when someone proposes to them a new job, a change of pace, something that competes with their commitment to your organization, it just sounds good. They're just going to be like, yeah, I wouldn't mind going back to graduate school. I wouldn't mind trying an alternative career path. And the reality is that it's not that so much. It's that they're just tired. They just want to change. And if you keep your utilization around 70%, get good people, get people who can do 200% of the work in 70% of the time, they're just going to feel a lot better. They're going to feel a lot less stressed out, and you're going to get so much more out of them, both from their happiness being better and from having just so much of a better culture. And the last thing is, you really want to lock down your enterprise with digital security and legal security, just to make it harder for people to do things that severely hurt you. When I talk about physical security, what I mean is making sure that you have your data striated into, meaning your data is separated out into things that are the keys to the palace, the really, really, really valuable trade secrets, and that you have a system in place to make sure that people don't even know things that they don't need to know. And if they do need to know it, that they can't copy it and email it around too easily, that they understand it's a major trade secret that they shouldn't be talking about, and so on and so forth. If you try to just protect everything, people are going to think that you're paranoid. They're not going to take your security seriously because they're going to think that you're just a paranoid sort of a person, and not that the information is really secure. So it's really better that you evaluate what's truly a secret from what's not, and focus people on what's truly a secret so that they feel that they have an understanding of what's secret versus what is not so secret, and potentially why it's going to hurt them if this information gets out there, and why this information is valuable to competitors. Second thing is just having good contracts in place, non-disclosure agreements, non-compete agreements, non-solicitation agreements, all of this stuff. A lot of people, and you may find this hard to believe if you're an entrepreneur, but a lot of people don't have the understanding that disclosing your confidential information, reselling your confidential information, soliciting your employees to work for other people, starting a business to compete with you, they don't have the understanding that any of those things are wrong. They feel that information is free. We live in a free society where anyone is willing to compete with anyone. They just don't have an understanding of intellectual property. And so when you give people these agreements to sign and you go over it with them and say, let me explain to you what our company is committing to do for you, and in exchange, what our company is asking you to commit to do for us, and we start saying one of the things you're not going to do is go into the same business that we're in the same town, or selling to the exact same customers that we're selling to, depending on what your circumstances, because learning all of our trade secrets and then competing with us, especially selling to the same people, would be deeply unfair. And you'd be surprised how many people say, but that's exactly what I want to do. I want to get into this industry and I want to start my own business. And I thought the best path forward for doing something like that would be going to work for someone who's already successful so I can learn how to do this. And then I would assume I would have your blessing after that to go out and open my own shop, and you'll get new people who need the training and experience. And entrepreneurs are usually like, no, I did not have that understanding at all. But, then people say, well, I can't sign this document now that I understand what it says. And you say, okay, good. Well, I'm really glad we had this discussion, because I sure would not want you to be opening a competing business. So, 85% of the time, people are not sneaky or devious about it. They honestly have a completely different outlook on the world. And just by explaining to them what they're signing ahead of time, you head off a world of problems. All right. So that's it for how to maximize your revenue per employee. If you'd like to ask me some questions or speak further, I'd be happy to speak with you or anyone else that has questions. I don't charge anything for information. If I know it and you don't know it, I'd be happy to share it with you. There's only a charge when I need to start looking at your documentation and giving you legal advice and drafting papers and stuff like that. So you should always feel free to give me a call. I love meeting new people, and I may even be able to refer you business if you are a pretty good technician and I meet people who need the kind of services that your startup offers. That's it for this episode. If you like it, please let me know. If you can think of anything that you think could be better, please let me know as well. If you have questions, I'd love to take it up on here. Otherwise, I will continue to keep covering ratios, because I think that's the best and fastest path to success. Thank you for listening.